Snow was falling on the driveway of the most expensive estate in Aspen, covering the tire tracks of a luxury SUV that had just sped away. Inside, the fireplace was dead. The lights were off. There were no stockings hung, no smell of roasting turkey, and no laughter. When billionaire Malcolm Vance walked through those double oak doors on Christmas morning, expecting to find his docile wife waiting with a scotch, he found nothing but an echo. Well, almost nothing. Sitting on the cold marble mantelpiece was a single manila envelope. Inside wasn't a Christmas card. It was a notification that the house he was standing in had been sold 12 hours ago, and the locks were being changed in 10 minutes. He thought he was the player. He didn't realize he was just the pawn. This is the story of how one woman turned a silent night into a total war. Malcolm Vance checked his reflection in the hallway mirror of the sprawling estate at 44 Blackwood Lane. He adjusted his silk tie, a deep crimson that matched the mood of the season, if not his heart. He looked impeccable. At 42, Malcolm was the CEO of Vance & Sterling, a private equity firm that ate smaller companies for breakfast. He was used to getting what he wanted, when he wanted it. And right now, what he wanted was to be in a penthouse in Manhattan with Sophia Thorne. Sophia was 24, an influencer with a biting wit and a body that Malcolm felt he deserved after 15 years of marriage to Eleanor. "Are you sure you have to go tonight?" Eleanor's voice was soft, coming from the top of the stairs. Malcolm didn't flinch. He was a professional liar. It was part of his job description. He turned, offering her that practiced, charming smile that had once made her knees weak. "I'm sorry, Elle," he said, smoothing his cashmere coat. "The merge with the Japanese sector is critical. If I'm not in Tokyo when the market opens on the 26th, we lose the deal. You know how it is. It's for us. It's for our future." Elena stood at the top of the landing. She was wearing a simple beige cardigan and jeans, her dark hair pulled back in a loose bun. She looked tired. Or perhaps, Malcolm thought dismissively, just aged. She wasn't the vibrant art student he'd married. She was the housewife who managed the staff, organized the charity galas, and kept 44 Blackwood Lane running like a 5-star hotel. "It's Christmas Eve, Malcolm," she said, her hand resting on the banister. "We were supposed to host your parents tomorrow." "My assistant, Sarah, already called them," Malcolm lied smoothly. Sarah hadn't called anyone because Sarah didn't know about the trip. "They understand. Business is war, Elena. No holidays on the battlefield." He checked his Patek Philippe watch. 4 Severt Path. Sophia was waiting at the private hangar. They weren't going to Tokyo. They were flying to St. Bart's. "I'll make it up to you," he said, walking to the door where his driver was waiting. "Buy yourself something nice. Use the black card." Elena descended the stairs slowly. The house was quiet. Too quiet for a holiday. "I already did," she murmured, though Malcolm was too focused on checking his phone to hear her clearly. "What was that?" "I said, travel safe, Malcolm," Elena said, stopping 3 steps from the bottom. She didn't lean in for a kiss. She didn't fix his collar. She just looked at him, with eyes that were unsettlingly clear. "Don't worry about the house. I'll take care of everything while you're gone." "I know you will. You always do." Malcolm opened the door, letting a gust of freezing wind into the warm foyer. "I'll call you when I land." "Goodbye, Malcolm," she said. The heavy door clicked shut. Malcolm jogged down the steps to the waiting Escalade. He slid into the back seat, pulling out his burner phone immediately to text Sophia. "Eagle has left the nest. Champagne on ice." As the car pulled away, he glanced back at the house. It was a fortress of stone and glass, worth $12 million, filled with art, imported furniture, and memories he no longer cared about. He felt a surge of adrenaline. He had pulled it off again. The dutiful husband by day, the playboy by night. He truly believed he was untouchable. He didn't see Elena walking to the window. He didn't see her watching the car disappear around the bend of Blackwood Lane. And he certainly didn't see her pick up her phone, dial a number, and say 3 words that would dismantle his entire existence. Execute the sale. To understand why Elena Vance, a woman known in her social circle for her patience and grace, was about to detonate her life, you have to go back 3 months. It hadn't started with a lipstick stain or a stray text message. Malcolm was too smart for the clichés. It started with a bank statement that shouldn't have existed. Elena was not just a housewife. Before she was Mrs. Vance, she was Elena Corves, a forensic accountant for one of the Big 4 auditing firms. She had given up her career to support Malcolm's rise, playing the role of the trophy wife because it helped his image with conservative investors. But she had never lost her ability to follow the money. In late September, while organizing Malcolm's home office for a charity audit, she found inconsistencies in the property tax filings for their vacation home in the Hamptons. The numbers didn't add up. There was a recurring transfer fee to an LLC called J. Thorne Consulting. Elena didn't confront him. She didn't scream. She went to work. For 3 weeks, while Malcolm slept beside her, Eleanor spent her nights in the guest room, digging. She used her old contacts. She traced the LLC. J. Thorne Consulting was registered to a Sophia Thorne, a 24-year-old model based in Soho. But the betrayal went deeper than sex. Elena discovered that Malcolm wasn't just spending his salary on Sophia. He was leveraging their assets. He had taken out a second mortgage on the Hamptons house without Elena's signature, forging it, in fact, to fund a failing venture capital project he was hiding from the board of Vance and Sterling. If the project failed, they would lose everything. He was gambling with her life, her security, and her home, all while sleeping with a woman young enough to be his daughter. The breaking point came on November 15th. Eleanor had found an email thread between Malcolm and his personal lawyer, a slimy man named Ryan Gecko. Subject: the divorce strategy. From M. Vance. To R. Gecko. Ryan, get the papers ready for January. I want to blindside her after the fiscal year ends, structure it so she gets the minimum. Claim she hasn't contributed to the estate in a decade. She's soft. She won't fight back. I want to keep the Blackwood house for Sophia. She likes the pool. Elena had read that email while sitting in her car outside the grocery store. She hadn't cried. She had felt a cold, metallic click in her chest. The love she had held for him for 15 years evaporated instantly, replaced by a terrifying clarity. He thinks I'm soft, she thought, gripping the steering wheel until her knuckles turned white. He thinks I'm a decoration. She drove home, walked into the study, and opened the safe. She knew the combination. Malcolm was too arrogant to change it, assuming she would never look. She retrieved a document from 5 years ago. It was a durable power of attorney. 5 years ago, Malcolm had undergone emergency heart surgery. Terrified of losing control of his empire while under anesthesia, he had signed full, unrestricted power of attorney over to Eleanor. It gave her the right to sell, trade, or liquidate any asset in his name if he was incapacitated or unavailable. Crucially, after he recovered, he had forgotten to revoke it. Eleanor took the document to a different lawyer, Silas Sterling. Silas was the estranged brother of Malcolm's business partner, and he hated Malcolm with a passion that burned brighter than the sun. "Is this valid?" Elena had asked Silas 2 weeks before Christmas, sliding the document across his mahogany desk. Silas, a man with grey hair and eyes like a shark, read it carefully. A slow, predatory smile spread across his face. Oh, it's valid, Elena. In the state of Connecticut, this is a nuclear launch code. As long as he is unavailable, say, out of the country on a lie, you can legally act as him. He's going to be with his mistress on Christmas, Elena said, her voice steady. He's telling everyone he's in Tokyo. Perfect, Silas said, leaning back. If he's in Tokyo, he can't stop you from selling the house, or liquidating the joint accounts, or transferring the stock. I don't just want to leave him, Silas, Elena said. He wants to give my home to her. He wants to leave me with nothing. So, Silas clasped his hands, we sell the house before he gets back. We liquidate the assets. We put the money in an offshore trust he can't touch. Can we do it in 24 hours? Silas grinned. For a commission, I can do it in 12. Now, back in the present, the Escalade was gone. The house was empty. Elena turned away from the window. She walked into the kitchen, picked up her phone, and dialed the number for a specialized moving company she had hired, one that handled sensitive, high-speed relocations. He's gone, Elena said into the phone. Bring the trucks. Take everything that has my name on it. Take the art, take the furniture. Leave his clothes and that ugly recliner he loves so much. And the house, Mrs. Vance? The mover asked. The buyers are arriving at 6 p.m. for the final walkthrough, Elena said. It needs to be empty by midnight. She hung up and looked around the kitchen. It was time to get to work. By 7 p.m. on Christmas Eve, 44 Blackwood Lane looked like a crime scene, albeit a very organized one. The sensitive relocation team Elena had hired moved with the silence of monks and the efficiency of Navy SEALs. They didn't use cardboard boxes. They used reinforced, climate-controlled crates. They weren't just moving furniture. They were extracting the soul of the house. Elena stood in the center of the living room, a clipboard in hand. She watched as the sprawling oil painting that hung above the fireplace, a moody 19th century seascape Malcolm had bought at Sotheby's for $450,000, was lifted from the wall. Careful with the frame, Elena instructed, her voice devoid of sentiment. It's going to auction next week. Yes, Mrs. Vance, the foreman nodded. Elena wasn't taking everything. That was the genius of her plan. She was taking only the assets that were liquid or appreciative. The art, the jewelry stored in the hidden wall safe behind the master closet. The antique silver. The collection of vintage wines in the cellar, valued at roughly $500,000. She left the furniture that Malcolm had picked out. The cold, modern leather sofas. The glass tables that showed every fingerprint. The heavy, masculine statues that screamed insecurity. She left the structure of his life, but she was stripping out the value. At 7:30 p.m., the headlights of a sleek, matte black Porsche Panamera swept across the front windows. Elena's pulse quickened. This was the point of no return. Silas Sterling entered first, shaking snow off his trench coat. Behind him walked a man who looked like he owned the weather. Joel Ash. Joel was 38, a tech mogul who had made his billions in cybersecurity. He was also Malcolm Vance's sworn enemy. 3 years ago, Malcolm had hostilely acquired a software startup Joel had been mentoring, gutted the staff, and sold the IP for parts. Joel had sworn publicly to bury Vance if he ever got the chance. Elena had called Joel at 5 p.m. He had been at a family dinner. He left before dessert. Mrs. Vance, Joel said, extending a hand. He didn't look around the house with wonder. He looked around with calculation. Silas tells me you're offering a distress sale. It's not a distress sale, Mr. Ash, Elena corrected him, shaking his hand firmly. It's a liquidation of assets due to a strategic realignment of my marriage. Joel smirked. I like the terminology. And the price? $9 million. Cash, immediate transfer of deed, no inspections, as is. The house was appraised at $12 million. $9 million was a steal. But for Elena, it wasn't about the profit margin. It was about speed. And it was about ensuring that when Malcolm tried to unwind this, he would be fighting a man with more money and better lawyers than he had. $9 million, Joel repeated. He walked over to the floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out over the snowy estate. Malcolm loves this house. He boasts about the view at every board meeting. He won't be boasting about it anymore, Silas interjected, pulling a stack of documents from his briefcase. We have the power of attorney here. We have the deed. We have the notary on video call waiting on the iPad. All we need is your signature and the wire transfer. Joel turned back to Eleanor. He looked at her, really looked at her. He saw the exhaustion in her eyes, but also the steel. He knew what this was. This wasn't business. This was revenge, and Joel Ashe was a connoisseur of revenge. I'll buy it, Joel said, on one condition. Which is? Elena asked. I want the security codes changed tonight, and I want to be the one to tell him he's trespassing when he tries to get in. Elena allowed herself a small, cold smile. The codes are yours, Mr. Ashe, but he won't be trespassing tonight. He's unavailable. He'll be back tomorrow morning. Even better. Joel pulled out his phone. I'm initiating the wire. Silas, get the notary. For the next hour, the dining room table became a war room. Papers were signed. Identities were verified. The digital transfer of $9 million moved through the ether, bouncing from Joel's holding company to a secure offshore trust Silas had set up for Elena in the Cayman Islands, a jurisdiction that would make it a nightmare for Malcolm to freeze. At 8:45 p.m., Silas's phone pinged. Funds received, Silas announced. The deed is recorded electronically. The house belongs to Mr. Ashe. Joel Ashe took a set of keys from his pocket, his own keys, and tossed them on the table. I have a security team en route. They'll change the locks by midnight. Elena picked up the pen one last time. She wrote a note on a piece of heavy cream cardstock. She didn't write a long, tearful letter. She didn't explain her heartbreak. She wrote one sentence. I hope she was worth the roof over your head. She sealed it in a manila envelope, along with the divorce papers Silas had drafted, papers that cited adultery and irreconcilable differences, and demanded 50% of his remaining shares in Vance and Sterling. She placed the envelope on the marble mantelpiece of the fireplace. Are you ready, Elena? Silas asked gently. Elena looked around the empty room. The movers had finished. The art was gone. The wine was gone. Her clothes were gone. The house felt huge and hollow, a glass shell waiting to shatter. Yes, she said. I'm ready. She walked out of the front door and into the snow, getting into her own modest sedan. She didn't look back. She drove past Joel Ashe's security team, who were already parking at the gate, looking like a paramilitary unit. Elena Vance was homeless for Christmas, but as she merged onto the highway, heading toward a boutique hotel where she had booked a suite under her maiden name, she felt something she hadn't felt in years. She was free. 3,000 miles away, the air was thick with the scent of hibiscus and sea salt. Malcolm Vance sat on the balcony of a private villa in St. Bart's, swirling a glass of Krug vintage champagne. The ocean was a black void below him, the waves crashing rhythmically against the cliffs. Inside the bedroom, Sophia was finishing her makeup. They had a reservation at Lisola for 10 p.m., followed by a VIP party on a yacht owned by a Russian oligarch. Malcolm felt like a king. He checked his phone. No missed calls from Eleanor. Perfect. The Tokyo ruse was holding. He had sent a scheduled email to her earlier that day, time-stamped to look like it came from the Japanese time zone, complaining about the jet lag and the stubbornness of the Japanese investors. He was a genius. "Babe, does this look too much?" Sophia stepped out onto the balcony. She was wearing a dress that cost more than most people's cars. It was essentially shimmering netting held together by hope and fashion tape. Malcolm smiled, the alcohol warming his blood. "You look expensive. I love it." She giggled and sat on his lap, running a manicured hand through his hair. "I'm so glad you could get away. Your wife really thinks you're in Japan." "Elena isn't." "Curious," Malcolm said, taking a sip of champagne. "She lives in a bubble I built for her. She's happy arranging flowers and managing the staff. She doesn't ask questions." "She sounds boring," Sophia pouted. "She is," Malcolm agreed, though a tiny prick of guilt, or perhaps just indigestion, poked at him. "But she's useful. She runs the estate, keeps the parents happy." "But you're going to leave her, right? You said January." "January," Malcolm promised, kissing her neck. "The papers are already being drafted. Gecko is handling it. She won't know what hit her." He wasn't lying about the papers, but he was lying about the timing. He didn't plan to leave Eleanor in January. He planned to string Sophia along for another 6 months, then maybe buy her a condo to keep her quiet. Divorce was expensive. Malcolm hated spending money he didn't have to. "I have a surprise for you," Malcolm said, checking his watch. "But we have to be quick. We fly back at 4 a.m. Sophia pulled back, her face dropping. 4 a.m.? You said we had the whole weekend. I have to be back for Christmas lunch with my parents, Jess. I told you this. It's part of the cover. If I'm not there, they'll call Elena, and the whole thing blows up." "So I just fly back alone?" "No, you fly back with me. I drop you at the condo. I go to the house, play the good husband for 6 hours, and then I come back to you on the 26th. It's just 1 day." Sophia looked annoyed, but the diamond bracelet he had given her an hour ago seemed to weigh down her anger. "Fine, but you owe me." "I always pay my debts," Malcolm grinned. If only he knew. The night was a blur of excess. Too much lobster, too much vodka, too much loud music. By the time they boarded the Gulf Stream at 4 a.m., Malcolm was hungover and irritable. The flight back was rough. Turbulence shook the small plane over the Atlantic. Malcolm couldn't sleep. He had a gnawing feeling in his gut. He told himself it was just the alcohol, but his mind kept drifting to Elena. Specifically, to the way she had said, "Goodbye, Malcolm," on the stairs. There was a finality to it that he hadn't processed at the time. And why hadn't she texted back about the Tokyo email? Elena always replied instantly. "Stay hydrated. Good luck. Miss you." Nothing. Just radio silence. "Agonizing," he muttered, rubbing his temples. They landed at Teterboro Airport at 8 a.m. on Christmas morning. The sky was a bruised grey, and snow was falling heavily. "Get a car service," Malcolm told Sophia on the tarmac, kissing her quickly on the cheek. "I can't be seen dropping you off." "Merry Christmas to me," she snapped, shivering in her thin coat as she walked towards the terminal. Malcolm jumped into his parked Escalade. He needed to get home, shower, and change into his travel clothes to make it look like he had just arrived from JFK off a commercial flight from Tokyo. He had it all planned out. He drove fast, the roads empty. He rehearsed his story. "The deal is tough, Elena. They're playing hardball. I missed you." He turned onto Blackwood Lane at 9:15 a.m. The first thing he noticed was the gate. Usually, the wrought iron gates were open when he approached, triggered by the transponder in his car. Today, they remained shut. "Damn sensors!" Malcolm cursed. He rolled down the window and punched his code into the keypad. "Access denied." He frowned. He typed it again. Access denied. What the hell? Malcolm muttered. The power must be out. He used the manual override key. It didn't turn. The lock had been changed. Panic, cold and sharp, finally pierced his hangover. He honked his horn long and loud, expecting the groundskeeper or Elena to come running. Instead, a man in a black uniform stepped out of the guard booth. Malcolm didn't recognize him. He wasn't one of their usual security staff. He looked like a bouncer for a high-security prison. "Open the gate," Malcolm yelled, leaning out the window. "Do you know who I am?" The guard walked slowly to the car. He didn't look intimidated. "I know who you are, Mr. Vance, and I have strict orders not to let you in." "Orders? From who? My wife?" Malcolm laughed, a hysterical barking sound. "Let me in or you're fired." "You don't employ me, sir," the guard said calmly. "This is private property. The owner has requested you be removed if you attempt entry." "I am the owner," Malcolm screamed, slamming his hand on the steering wheel. "Not anymore, sir." Malcolm stared at him. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. "What did you say?" "The property changed hands yesterday, sir. The new owner is in residence. He left a package for you." The guard reached into the booth and pulled out a manila envelope. He slid it through the window of the Escalade. Malcolm grabbed it. His hands were shaking so hard he ripped the paper. He pulled out the contents. The deed of sale. Signed by Elena Vance, acting as power of attorney. The sale price, 9,000 dollars. The buyer, Ash Holdings, LLC. Joel Ash. Malcolm felt the bile rise in his throat. Joel Ash. His nemesis. Joel Ash was sleeping in his bedroom. Joel Ash was looking at his view. And then, the second document. The divorce petition. And the note. "I hope she was worth the roof over your head." Malcolm looked up at the house on the hill. He could see a figure standing on the balcony. His balcony. The figure was holding a coffee cup, wearing a robe. Even from this distance, Malcolm recognized the smug posture of Joel Ash. Joel raised his coffee cup in a mock toast. Malcolm Vance, the man who controlled markets, the man who destroyed companies, the man who thought he was a king, sat in his freezing car and did the only thing he could do. He screamed. Malcolm sat in the Escalade at the bottom of the driveway for 10 minutes, the engine idling, the heat blasting against his freezing hands. He dialed Ryan Gecko's number for the 5th time. Finally, the lawyer picked up. The background noise was loud. Kids screaming, wrapping paper tearing. "Malcolm! It's Christmas morning, for God's sake! I'm opening presents with my nieces!" Ryan hissed. "She sold the house, Ryan," Malcolm said, his voice devoid of inflection. He was in shock. "Elena. She sold 44 Blackwood. I'm outside. The locks are changed. Joel Ash is inside, drinking coffee." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Then, the sound of a door closing as Ryan stepped away from the noise. "What do you mean she sold it? Both your names are on the deed. She can't sell without your signature." "She used a power of attorney from the heart surgery 5 years ago. I never revoked it." "Oh, Jesus," Ryan muttered. "The durable POA. Malcolm, I told you to shred that thing years ago. Fix it, Ryan. Get an injunction. Get the police. I can't get a judge on Christmas Day, Malcolm. And if the paperwork is valid, and knowing Elena, she probably had it triple-checked, the police won't touch it. It's a civil matter. Technically, if she has POA, she is you. She sold the house to Ash legally." "So I'm homeless," Malcolm roared, slamming his fist into the dashboard again. "I have $12 million in assets, and I'm homeless." "Go to a hotel," Ryan advised, his voice tight. "Don't make a scene. If you break a window or threaten Ash, you'll get arrested, and that will destroy your leverage in the divorce. Check into the Ritz. We'll file an emergency motion the second the courts open on the 26th. We'll claim mental incompetence or coercion. We'll fight it." Malcolm hung up. He threw the phone onto the passenger seat. He reversed the Escalade, tires spinning on the ice, and drove away from the house he had built to impress people he hated. He drove to the Ritz-Carlton in downtown White Plains. He walked into the lobby, still wearing his casual travel clothes, looking disheveled and manic. The concierge, who knew him, looked surprised but professional. "Mr. Vance, Merry Christmas. We weren't expecting you." "I need the presidential suite," Malcolm barked. "For a week." "Of course, sir." The concierge typed rapidly. "That will be $12,000 a night due to the holiday demand. May I have your card?" Malcolm slapped his black card, the Centurion American Express, onto the marble counter. This card had no limit. It was the symbol of his power. The concierge swiped it. He waited. He frowned. He swiped it again. "I'm sorry, Mr. Vance. The card has been declined." "That's impossible," Malcolm sneered. "Run it again." "I have, sir. It says, account frozen. Report stolen." Malcolm felt the blood drain from his face. "Try the Visa." He threw another card down. Declined. The corporate card? Declined. Elena. She hadn't just sold the house. She had used the power of attorney to contact the banks. She had reported his cards lost or stolen, or perhaps she had simply drained the liquid cash from the joint accounts that acted as collateral for his credit lines. "Mr. Vance?" The concierge lowered his voice, pity creeping into his tone. "Maybe there's a fraud alert? Do you have another form of payment? Or perhaps cash?" Malcolm Vance, the CEO of Vance & Sterling, checked his wallet. He had $300 in cash and some Japanese yen he had bought for the fake trip to Tokyo. He didn't have enough for a room at the Ritz. He barely had enough for a Motel 6. He grabbed his cards and stormed out of the lobby, ignoring the whispers of the staff. Back in his car, his phone rang. It was Sophia. "Malcolm!" Her voice was shrill. "My card got declined at Starbucks. You said I could use the supplementary card for the flight back to the city. This is embarrassing." "Shut up, Sophia," Malcolm snapped. "Excuse me. You don't talk to me like that. You promised me." "I said shut up," Malcolm screamed. "Elena knows. She knows everything. She froze the accounts. She sold the house. I'm currently sitting in a parking lot with no money and nowhere to sleep." There was a pause. "Wait," Sophia said, her voice changing. The flirtatious girlish tone vanished, replaced by a cold, hard pragmatism. "So you're broke?" "It's temporary," Malcolm lied. "I'll have it fixed by tomorrow. I just need to lay low. Can I come to your place? The loft in Soho?" That's not a good idea," Sophia said quickly. "My sister is staying with me. There's no room. I paid for the rent on that loft, Sophia. Actually, the lease is in my name. Look, Malcolm, you sound really unstable right now. Maybe you should call your wife. Call me when you have your money back." Click. Malcolm stared at the phone. The silence in the car was deafening. He ended up checking into a roadside motel off I-95. The room smelled of stale cigarettes and bleach. He sat on the lumpy mattress, staring at the water stain on the ceiling. He was hungry, but he was too afraid to spend his remaining cash on food. He opened his laptop. Thankfully, he had that with him, and logged into his personal banking portal. Access denied. Account locked due to suspicious activity. He tried his email. Password incorrect. She had changed his passwords. She had locked him out of his digital life. But then, a thought struck him. Vance & Sterling, the firm. Elena couldn't touch the firm. That was a separate entity. The corporate bylaws protected him. He was the CEO. He owned 40% of the shares. She couldn't sell his company out from under him. He sat up, a flicker of hope returning. The office. He could go to the office. He could sleep on the couch in his executive suite. He could access the corporate accounts, wire himself an emergency stipend, and start the legal war. "You want a war, Elena?" he whispered to the empty motel room. "I'll show you a war. I'll bankrupt you. I'll sue you for every penny you stole." He didn't realize that Elena hadn't just stolen his money. She had stolen his reputation, and she had delivered the evidence to the one place he thought was safe. December 26th dawned grey and slushy. Malcolm had slept in his suit. He showered in the motel's lukewarm water, shaved with a disposable razor he bought from the vending machine, and drove to the Vance & Sterling headquarters in downtown Greenwich. He felt a surge of confidence as he pulled into the underground garage. This was his kingdom. Here, he was God. He took the private elevator up to the 40th floor. He strode through the glass doors, ready to bark orders at his assistant, Sarah. But Sarah wasn't at her desk. In fact, the entire office was eerily quiet. People were there, analysts, junior associates. But when they saw him, they didn't say, "Good morning." They looked down. They shuffled papers. They avoided eye contact. Malcolm felt a prickle of unease. He walked toward his office. Standing in front of his office door was a man in a grey suit, a security guard. But not the building security. This was private security. "Mr. Vance," the guard said, blocking the door. "You can't go in there." "Excuse me." Malcolm laughed, a sharp, incredulous sound. "This is my office. Get out of my way." "I'm afraid your access has been suspended, pending an internal investigation," a voice said from behind him. Malcolm spun around. Standing there was Silas Sterling. Silas was the younger brother of the co-founder, Arthur Sterling, who had retired years ago. Silas was the company's external counsel, but he rarely came to the office. Next to Silas was Arthur Sterling himself, leaning on a cane, looking old but furious. And next to them was Eleanor. Eleanor looked stunning. She was wearing a sharp white blazer and tailored black trousers. She wore no makeup, and she looked 10 years younger than she had 2 days ago. She didn't look at Malcolm with anger. She looked at him with indifference. "What is this?" Malcolm demanded, straightening his tie. "Elena, what are you doing here?" "Arthur, why is security blocking my office?" "We're having an emergency board meeting, Malcolm," Arthur Sterling said, his voice shaking with suppressed rage. "Conference room A, now." Malcolm followed them into the glass-walled conference room. The entire board was there. 6 men and women who controlled the fate of the company. They looked grave. Malcolm took his seat at the head of the table out of habit, but Arthur remained standing. 2 days ago, Arthur began, Mrs. Vance approached the board with a package of documents. "She's a vindictive housewife going through a divorce," Malcolm interrupted, slamming his hand on the table. "Anything she gave you is a fabrication designed to leverage a settlement. I'll have her arrested for corporate espionage." "Shut up, Malcolm," Silas Sterling said quietly. He slid a file across the table. Malcolm looked down. It wasn't a divorce paper. It was a copy of the loan application he had submitted to the bank for the second mortgage on the Hamptons house. "So?" Malcolm scoffed. "I took a loan against my own property. That's personal business." "Look at the signature, Malcolm," Silas said. "You forged Elena's signature. That's bank fraud. That's a federal crime. But that's not the worst part." Silas flipped the page. "You used the loan proceeds, $3 million, to invest in Project Apex." Malcolm froze. Project Apex was a shell company he had set up to hide bad debts from the company's quarterly report. It was illegal. It was cooking the books. "I don't know what you're talking about," Malcolm lied. "I was in Tokyo securing the Japanese merger. I can prove—" "You weren't in Tokyo." Elena spoke for the first time. Her voice was calm, clear, and devastating. She pressed a button on the remote. The projector screen lowered. On the screen appeared a series of photos. Malcolm and Sophia drinking champagne on the balcony in St. Bart's. Malcolm and Sophia on the yacht. Malcolm kissing Sophia at the airport. These were taken by a private investigator I hired 3 weeks ago, Elena said. While you billed the company $45,000 for a first-class trip to Tokyo and accommodations at the Park Hyatt, you were actually in the Caribbean with Miss Thorne. The board members gasped. This wasn't just adultery. This was embezzlement of company funds. You billed the company for a personal vacation, Arthur Sterling said, his face red. You lied to the shareholders about the Japanese merger, which, we discovered this morning, fell through because you weren't there to close it. Arthur, listen, Malcolm pleaded, sweat beading on his forehead. I can explain. The stress. I needed a break. I was going to pay it back. We audited your expense accounts yesterday, Malcolm, Silas continued. The jewellery, the apartment rental in Soho, the dinners. You funneled over $400,000 of company money into your affair over the last 18 months. The room was silent. The weight of the evidence was crushing. Malcolm Vance, Arthur said formally. Effective immediately, the board has voted to terminate your position as CEO for cause. This means you receive no severance, no golden parachute. Your stock options are voided due to the bad actor clause in your contract. You can't do that, Malcolm screamed, standing up. I built this company. You also committed felonies using this company's name, Silas said. We have a fiduciary duty to report this to the SEC and the district attorney. The police are waiting in the lobby, Malcolm. Malcolm looked at the door. Through the glass, he could see 2 uniformed officers standing by the reception desk. He turned to Eleanor. She was gathering her papers, looking bored. Eleanor, he whispered, please don't let them arrest me. I'm your husband. Eleanor stopped. She walked over to him, close enough that he could smell her perfume, a scent he hadn't noticed in years because he had been too busy chasing cheaper scents. You're not my husband, Malcolm, she said softly. You're a liability, and I just liquidated you. She turned to Silas. I believe my business here is done. I'll be in touch regarding the divorce settlement. I expect 50% of whatever assets are left after the government is done with him. Of course, Elena. Silas nodded. Elena walked out of the conference room. She walked past the security guards, past the police officers, and into the elevator. Malcolm stood alone in the boardroom, surrounded by the people who used to fear him. Mr. Vance, the head of security said, stepping into the room. If you'll come with us, the officers would like a word. Malcolm Vance, the king of glass castles, slumped into his chair. The war was over, and he hadn't even fired a single shot. 6 months later, the summer heat in New York City was oppressive, a sticky, humid blanket that smelled of garbage and exhaust. Malcolm Vance sat on the edge of a fold-out sofa in a studio apartment in Queens. The air conditioner rattled violently in the window, dripping water onto the linoleum floor. He was wearing a t-shirt with a stain on the collar and sweatpants. Around his left ankle was a black plastic bracelet with a blinking green light. GPS monitoring, a condition of his bail. His fall had been spectacular. The Vance scandal had dominated the financial news cycle for weeks. The SEC investigation had uncovered not just the fraud with Project Apex, but years of tax evasion and insider trading that Malcolm had thought was buried deep enough to never see the light of day. He was facing 15 years in federal prison. His assets were frozen. His reputation was radioactive. Even his old friends, the ones he drank scotch with at the club, wouldn't return his calls. They didn't want to be subpoenaed. He scrolled through Instagram on an old iPhone 8. His latest model had been seized as evidence. He followed a hashtag he shouldn't have. Or a summer love. A photo popped up. It was Sophia Thorne. She looked radiant. She was on a yacht, bigger than the one in St. Bart's. She was wearing a white bikini and holding a glass of rosé. Her arm was draped around a man who looked like he was 22, with bleached hair and a hoodie that probably cost $1,000. The caption read, "Crypto King treating me like a queen." Blessed new beginnings. Malcolm felt a hollow ache in his chest. She hadn't even visited him in the holding cell. The day the news broke, she had blocked his number and released a statement to Page 6, claiming she was a victim of Malcolm Vance's manipulation and had no knowledge of his financial crimes. She had played him, just like everyone else. A knock at the door made him jump. He wasn't expecting anyone. His lawyer, a court-appointed public defender named Gary who smelled like stale coffee, wasn't due until Thursday. Malcolm shuffled to the door and opened it. A courier stood there. "Package for Malcolm Vance." Malcolm signed for it. It was a small, heavy box wrapped in elegant silver paper. There was no return address, but the postmark was from Positano, Italy. His heart hammered. Elena. He took the box to the wobbly kitchen table and tore off the paper. He opened the lid. Inside sat a watch. It wasn't just any watch. It was his Patek Philippe Grandmaster chime. The one he had bought to celebrate his first million. The one he thought had been lost in the chaotic move or seized by the feds. Underneath the watch was a note, written in that familiar, elegant script. "Malcolm, the feds missed this one. It was in the safe deposit box you forgot about. The one under your mother's maiden name. I found the key in your desk. I could have sold it. It's worth $2 million. Enough to pay for a real lawyer. Enough to maybe reduce your sentence. Enough to get you out of that apartment. But I didn't sell it. I'm sending it back to you. Because I want you to have it. I want you to wear it. And every time you look at it to check the time, I want you to remember that you are running out of it." Tick-tock. Elena Malcolm stared at the watch. It was a masterpiece of engineering. It was worth a fortune. It was his ticket to a better defense, a chance at freedom. But as he held it, he realized the cruelty of the gift. He couldn't sell it. If he sold it, the sudden influx of $2 million would alert the feds. They would ask where the money came from. They would realize he had hidden assets. It would violate his bail. It would add 5 years to his sentence for hiding evidence. He couldn't wear it. Walking around Queens with a $2 million watch was a death sentence. He couldn't keep it. If the police raided his apartment again, which they did randomly, they would find it and charge him. Elena hadn't sent him a lifeline. She had sent him a curse, a reminder of the wealth he could look at, touch, but never use again. Positano, Italy. The sun was setting over the Tyrrhenian Sea, turning the water a bruised purple and gold. Elena Vance sat on the terrace of a villa that smelled of lemons and wild rosemary. She looked different. Her hair was cut short, a chic bob that framed her face. She wore a linen dress that flowed in the breeze. She looked younger, yes, but mostly she looked lighter. The weight of 15 years of lies had been lifted. "More wine, Signora?" Elena looked up. Joel Ash was walking onto the terrace, holding a bottle of vintage Barolo. He wasn't wearing a suit. He was wearing shorts and a polo shirt. He looked relaxed, the shark-like intensity of the boardroom replaced by a vacationer's ease. "Please," Elena smiled, holding out her glass. Joel poured the wine and sat opposite her. "I got an email from Silas. The courier delivered the package." "Good," Elena said, taking a sip. "Did he accept it?" "He signed for it. Silas says he's probably staring at it right now, trying to figure out if it's a trap." "It is a trap," Elena said simply. "It's the burden of possession. He always defined himself by what he owned. Now he owns something that can destroy him." Joel chuckled, shaking his head. "Remind me never to cross you, Elena. You play the long game better than anyone I know." "I learned from the best," she said, her eyes drifting to the horizon. "I spent 15 years watching a man lie to everyone he met. You pick up a few tricks." "So," Joel leaned back. "What's next? You have the money. You have the freedom. You have 50% of the settlement coming once the feds strip the carcass. You never have to work again." Elena swirled her wine. She thought about the forensic accounting firm she had left behind all those years ago. She thought about the thrill of the hunt, the satisfaction of finding the truth hidden in the numbers. "Actually," Elena said, a mischievous glint in her eye, "I was thinking of starting a consulting firm." "Oh?" Joel raised an eyebrow. "What kind of consulting?" "Forensic divorce accounting," Elena said. "Helping women find the money their husbands are hiding. Helping them get out before they get burned." Joel laughed, raising his glass. "You're going to be the most dangerous woman in New York." "I already am," Elena replied, clinking her glass against his. She looked out at the vast, open sea. She thought of Malcolm in his cramped apartment, staring at a watch that marked the seconds of his ruined life. She thought of the snow on Blackwood Lane. She took a deep breath of the salty air. It didn't smell like betrayal anymore. It smelled like victory. And that is how the Queen of Forensics checkmated the King of Glass Castles. Malcolm thought he held all the cards because he had the loud voice and the CEO title. He forgot that the person who really holds the power isn't the one spending the money, it's the one counting it. Elena didn't just get revenge, she got justice. She proved that while betrayal might pay off in the short term, the receipts last forever. What do you think? Was Eleanor's final gift with the watch too cruel, or was it the perfect poetic justice? And would you hire Elena to handle your finances? I know I would. If you enjoyed this story of high-stakes revenge, do me a favor. Smash that like button. It helps the channel more than you know. Make sure you're subscribed and have that notification bell turned on so you never miss the next drama. And let me know in the comments, what's the pettiest thing you've ever done to an ex? I'll be reading the best ones in the next video. Thanks for watching, and remember, verify everything.